the world of Harry Potter. But today, instead of your regular scheduled programming, we are going to basically just scream into the void because 2020 is the year of the devil.
This is the second installment of our Screaming Into the Void series. The first, I think, happened right after the first round of turf tweets.
Correct.
If I'm not mistaken. Yeah, I was going to say, I'm pretty sure that the first time we did this was right after all this happened back in December of 2019. The year that I miss so much.
I'm Adri. Let's introduce ourselves. I'm Adri, a recovering English major and person who is really tired of quarantine.
I'm Helene, and I'm just tired.
Same. Same. I have been falling asleep in places like the couch without meaning to. I don't know if it's 2020 or my age or both.
I can't sleep, so I don't think it's 2020 because 2020 is like messed up my sleep schedule altogether. So
yeah, I mean, I think also being inside the house so much has messed with like my internal clock.
Yep.
And not really being able to connect with people in person really messed up like my, I guess, like energy levels. I don't know. TBD. Like, I don't know what's going on.
All I know is I go back to the office next week. So we'll see how that goes.
Oh, wow. Well, hopefully that goes well. Just a quick, before we scream into the void together, just a quick thing for listeners. The episodes that are coming out after this Screaming to the Void edition will be bi-weekly and are all kind of episodes that have been recorded for a while. So we may not be making like the most up-to-date references to COVID and stuff like that. So
yes, we recorded them before we knew that the world was going to be in the state that it is right now.
Or, during the first few weeks of the pandemic or the first month. And then we were like, oh, cool. This throws a wrinkle into our whole plan.
Yeah.
But we decided this was a really important thing to do because like 2020.
Yeah, the past few weeks alone have just been a complete ride.
And because this is a Harry Potter podcast, Helene, I think we should start with one judgmental Karen Rowling and her turf tweets.
Yes. I was between judgmental Karen and juvenile Karen, but
I feel like juvenile is kind of giving her an out,
Yeah, I guess.
Like juvenile implies some sense of innocence. Judgmental is like someone who's already kind of gathered all evidence or has had access to the right evidence, but decided against it.
Yeah, no, that's true. I can see what you mean.
But let's start by saying that this podcast and MuggleNet believes that trans lives matter and that the trans, queer, non-binary identities are valid. And the
one statement that J.K. Rowling herself just can't seem to say, that we would all just love to hear her say, is trans women are women and trans men are men.
Yes, like 100%. Completely, like, again, trans identities are valid.
Yes.
And why do we have a problem with, like, having empathy for fellow human beings? Like, I don't understand this world.
Yeah, I mean, her statement that came out what was it, only yesterday at this point, or was it 2 days ago? I think it was yesterday.
What is time? I don't know.
Her essay that she wrote, that she published to her website. I feel like it threw a wrench in a lot of things because she's a good writer. She has the ability to eloquently state what she is trying to get across in a way that basically convinces people who are not exactly educated on the topic, or who already kind of have somewhat similar views to hers, that she is right and everything she's saying is reasonable and accurate because she's a good writer. And so I think that a lot of people are questioning things after her essay came out, and we're here to tell you that it's still problematic, still not a great message.
Well, it's a lot of posturing from someone who wrote a series that is centered on men and had like very few redeeming like women characters, which is problematic for me. And it was very much rooted on the like point of view of Harry, and we love Harry, and you know we do, but it's also kind of like, well, why couldn't have been, Harriet? You know what I mean? And also she writes the Cormoran Strike novels under under a male pen name, and all of a sudden,
J.K. Rowling is also meant to be a male pen name. Yeah.
So like, of course, she's like, well, I write as a man, so obviously I know that I'm truly not a man. Like, even that kind of like false equivalency that she's making by just doing those things, it just kind of like it's the argument she puts forth. Not that she is putting forth the argument of like, well, I have a male pen name. I'm not saying that, but even those arguments she puts forth are as flimsy as that. But it's just the way she wraps them up makes them feel like they have much more substance than they do.
I mean, one of her main arguments in her essay is that her femalehood, her womanhood, feels threatened by by men, aka trans women who she refuses to gender
so
correctly.
She misgenders them. Go
ahead. Men who just like want to say they're women so that they can access women's private spaces, so that they can she's threatened by these people that she doesn't trust, and like generalizes every trans woman to be this type of person, and says that their actions and by letting them identify as women, which is what is true to them in their hearts, that directly threatens her own female and womanhood, and then all of these like charitable causes that she works towards.
Okay, so let's dismantle this like bit by bit, right? First off, let's talk about the misgendering, right? So like gender dysphoria is a real thing, and like there are no like she talks about how there's like a high percentage of people who return back to their original gender or whatever. That's not true.
No.
Period. In order to transition, individuals have to go through like psychotherapy and like close observation. It's not like something like you just wake up and decide, right? So
yes, trans people do not take transitioning lightly. But also, what she fails to realize from her like mountain of privilege and her piles of money is that like surgery and hormones and the transitioning process, the therapy that goes along with it, everything it's expensive. And unfortunately, not everybody who wishes that they could go through that process can afford to go through that process. And so by saying a trans woman who is still male presenting because they can literally not afford to express themselves physically that the way that they want to is a man, like it's just she's just so it just baffles me that that's not something she realizes either.
Well, and the other part of this is also that it seems like she picks and chooses when she's researching what she wants to listen to and what to avoid. And as a former English professor, that like really fucks me up because I'm like, do you not know about reliable sources? Or do you just like pick and choose whatever makes you feel like warm and fuzzy inside, like in your privilege? And like what is this like fetish, like that there's like this fetish of white cis women and men of, oh my god, I'm so persecuted because they feel like they don't have claims to say that they're being persecuted. J.K. Rowling is not the only person nor the first to claim persecution because their privilege like makes them somehow a target. And I'm like, no, there's punching up
Yeah,
and
well,
then there's punching down. And my dear, you have always been punching down.
yeah, and unfortunately, like there was a very similar argument when the topic of gay marriage started to really come into the mainstream, where a lot of cis straight couples would say that they're like the institution of marriage was being threatened if we allowed people of the same sex to marry each other. And so I feel like
Ugh,
that's
I
very
roll.
similar, like using your privilege and saying that you feel threatened by somebody else's existence when it literally does not ever directly affect you.
Well, because that that form of feeling like threatened in quotation marks is
Mhm.
the closest that people in privilege will ever get to oppression. So that initial feeling of discomfort, they usually interpret as oppression, whereas the people who are being oppressed are like, no, man, like that's just discomfort at your privilege. No one's forcing this on you. That's just you realizing something about yourself, but you don't really want to acknowledge it, so you're just going to say, oh, I'm oppressed.
Yes, there's no way, there in no situation can I imagine that by giving someone else more rights or more recognitions or, more respect, how that would take away from your own rights or
Well,
your own privileges.
it's also the idea of like the more equal footing that other people can gain in society, the more threatened their privileged position in society becomes. So that discomfort and that, kind of a little bit of like leaning some kind of imaginary threat to their power and money or whatever or place in society, then they're like, oh my God, I must be oppressed. Because privileged people, because of their privilege, they've never felt discomfort.
Yeah. And J.K. Rowling is a woman who definitely, and as she outlined in her essay, she grew up with and like, became an adult with these experiences that definitely put her in, I wouldn't exactly, I mean, I don't want to say minority groups, but like
Well,
she,
okay, so let's say that she had some obstacles, right?
yes,
Like
yes.
she had obstacles. There's a really interesting, I don't want to say game, exercise that that people do in order to show equity and equality in in all areas of life. And it's more like, take a step forward if you were ever like in a minority in your class, you know,
Hmm.
racially. Take a step forward if so it's more of like it takes class, gender, race, and other factors into consideration to show how people's lived experiences can position them later and like in different places in their lives. And for instance, like someone who comes from like a wealthy like family and just so happens to be a minority may have almost like it may have more up like educational and wealth opportunities than a person who happens to be white and comes from a very uh, fractured home life and also like is low income. But that doesn't make it that's more like case by case scenario, right?
Mhm.
But that being said, just because judgmental Karen um,
Went through some stuff.
like encounter some obstacles in her life doesn't
Yeah.
mean that those obstacles hindered her from getting the same kind of treatment that a person of color in her shoes would have,
Yes. And
or a person of color who happened to be trans, or like
Mhm. Yeah. And I feel like she used yes, and I feel like she used her past experiences um as a I don't know, I feel like when I read her essay, it came off to me, at least a large part of it came off to me as just like a basic, very deep-seated distrust in men.
yes.
And which, I mean, I get it. That like if you are a sexual assault survivor, if you are, a domestic abuse survivor, as J.K. Rowling has officially like made a statement that she is a survivor of both, um, it can definitely cause PTSD, trauma, and if you don't go to therapy and work through those things, it can definitely those traumatic events that happen to you can seep into everyday life, into everyday interactions and relationships. And unfortunately, I do feel like she is, for some reason, decided to latch on her deep seated mistrust of men onto the trans women community specifically. And I'm not exactly sure
But
what good
I
that
mean,
does.
like that's a great like psychoanalysis, but also she has more money than God. She can literally hire a full-time 24/7 psychiatrist or psychologist for herself.
But she also, on top of that, I feel like she also has this sort of like hero complex because
Like no doubt.
I mean she wrote these books which then became like this anthem to like a worldwide generation. People put her, and like including me, people put her on a pedestal for years, decades, because they thought that she was a
She
beacon of
understood.
yeah,
She understood.
she's a beacon of love and acceptance, all of these morals and values that we took by reading her novels. Like we put that on her, which I mean, if she was the person we thought she was, that wouldn't necessarily be as big of an issue. Unfortunately, since we did project that onto her, I feel like that has maybe made it so that she feels like she can do no wrong, which unfortunately like is obviously not true, and she had to learn that the hard way. But I feel like
Well, I also feel like it's just laziness on her part, Helene. I have to come back to this. She has the resources, she has the money to, like do ethical, science based sociological research that most of us can only dream of. She has access to contact like the
and
best minds,
yeah.
and she doesn't do that. Instead, she goes down like
Well,
on this Google search of like pseudoscience and hateful rhetoric and decides,
unfortunately,
hey,
so
yes. Sorry.
Yeah, no, I mean, I totally understand, and like, but unfortunately, like, she is claiming that she has done all of those things, and I think that's part of the problem because she probably has done research, she probably has spoken to scientists and experts in the field, but unfortunately, I feel like she is like seeking out specifically people who like it's confirmation bias. She's seeking out.
But that's not real research, right?
No,
Like that's
no,
already
she didn't go to she didn't
to
get a
trans
degree.
women.
No, she didn't get a degree in like actual scientific method. She just I like she probably thought she was doing the research, thought she was doing the work when she was really seeking out sources that would confirm what she already believed instead of. I mean, like what one of the worst things that got me the most in her statement was like she was saying, "I no like I've read books." Actually, this was in her tweet. She was like, "I've read books by trans people." And I was like, "Yeah,
Wow.
but have you ever had a conversation with one?" And not just like one that like is in the small percentage of people who regretted their transition later on. Did you have conversations with all types of like the transgender community they are humans. They range in a variety of different opinions on different subjects and different topics. They have different life experiences. They're like not all trans people are exactly the same. So you have to, if you want to fully understand the trans community, you can't just talk to a small group within the trans community and be like, oh, all trans people are probably this way. Because that's just like saying all black people are criminals or all Jewish people are money grabbing assholes. I mean, like
Well, I
you
mean, she did write the goblins that Gringotts a certain way. Let's not forget.
I mean, yes, there are definitely prejudices that come up in the series that we can get into, all of those deeper at a different time. But I mean, obviously she has a lot of prejudices and like things that, microaggressions,
It
but
just feels like a lot of her thinking is very extreme. It's either
yes,
or, like there's no
yes.
room for doubt in her brain. And to me, like that is very disappointing, right? Because I'm just like, yeah, but someone who is open and loving and accepting, like all these values we assigned to her books because we latched on to that theme, whether it was there or whether we kind of pulled the dots together ourselves and created that narrative for
Yeah.
ourselves. Um, that's not someone who's loving and accepting, is someone who's already like, oh, absolutely, like this is my stand and I will die on this hill, even if like there's like 1,000% like more stuff to contradict me.
Well, yes, I think the main issue with her entire essay is generalizations. Generalizations, generalizations, generalizations. Like literally the entire thing is riddled with them.
I
She
mean,
she discusses one person's experience and says, because of this, I distrust all trans women. Because of
listen,
this, I don't think that they should have access to female spaces because of this. And it's like you, and like that, it's kind of the same in the books too. Like you could, she has a problem with generalizations because like all Slytherins, evil, all Death Eaters, evil, unless you want to talk about Snape, in which case she tried to make him look good, but really he was still evil. Uh,
well,
so
even when she tries to make someone likable who used to be bad, she fails at that because um their likability is rooted on like incel tendencies. So no thanks.
yes, and like she likes to generalize like when she's describing someone who is, quote unquote evil, she likes to describe them as physically ugly, lots of fat phobia.
Yep.
Like it's and everybody who's good is,
It's
physically
trim.
attractive and like I think I mean a lot of us learned our morality from Harry Potter and the fact that like black versus white, good versus evil, love always wins. And I think as a child, that's a good outlook
And
to
that's
start
yep.
with. It's a good outlook to start with in life. But she's a, 50-year-old woman, 45-year-old woman,
54.
54-year-old woman. and she's gotta, it's time to learn that just because you read this one story about this one trans person's regret about transitioning too early in life, like that's not indicative of the entire community. And it's just, she just needs to learn this. I don't like, I wish that she would educate herself
See, but
properly.
I think that's also what happens with a lot of cis white people, is because they're so used to being the default in every setting, i.e., like most of the narratives are centered on white people.
Mm-hmm.
The white person is the lead, or the hero of the story. Even if the story is about like people of color, there's like the white savior figure usually, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, and like 9 times out of 10, that's not historically accurate. Wow, what a surprise, right? And she's thinking like, well, I haven't gone through this, right? So ergo, no one else can go through it. And she makes this statement about, she wonders if she was born 30 years later, if she would have
Oh my God.
yeah, if she might have tried to transition. And she's equivocating the idea of facing the patriarchy and facing treatment as a woman in the patriarchy, making a false equivalence between that and trying to to transition to a man because you feel like you are a man. Like,
That was literally like my least favorite part
yes.
of the entire essay. Like that.
So, so it's like, no, judgmental Karen,
Not
just
that I have a
because
favorite part, but still.
like just because like facing the world as a cis woman, you do see like how hard it is to be a woman, but that is not, and sometimes you wonder like, man, it would have been easier had I been born a man, right? Like that idea, but that is not the same as feeling like you are in the wrong body, that your
She
biological sex does not.
she 100% used that experience to get sympathy. She 100% used that to make people feel like, oh, she knows what it feels like. And oh my God, how would her life have been different if she would have been born in a time where it was quote unquote easy to transition? Would we,
Male pen names, whatever.
she's a privilege to be able to use that to her advantage and not have any negative consequences or
Yes,
like
exactly. I mean,
be.
now I'm not saying she feels like she's trans. Like I don't at all. I'm saying like obviously she's trying to falsely equivocate uh or make a parallel between like being like things that you and I talk about all the time, Helene, where it's like, man, like it's so hard being a woman in this fucking world. Would have been easier if I was born a man. With like, I feel like a man, like I am a man, and my biological sex does not fit my gender identity.
Well, yes,
Those
I
are
think
two different things.
yes, she definitely, I feel like she used that argument to show that, oh, if transitioning is so easy and we just let people do it all willy nilly, then people are
And
just
that's
going
not
to,
true.
yeah, well, it's not, but this is me speaking as,
Yeah.
her deluded self. If we make it so easy and people can just, because people can just like say they're a woman by like signing a certificate or whatever, then people are just going to transition to escape the societal norms of life and because it makes their life easier, quote unquote easier.
Honestly, this book to me really sounds like a bitter aunt who watches too much Fox News and is like, I had it so hard when I was young. And like, what is this like trans non binary bullshit? In my day, we only had male and female.
It just seems so tone deaf because obviously, like, why would you make the decision to transition or be, first of all, make the decision is not even the right, like that's not even the right word, but that in her mind that's what they're doing, is just making a decision to be trans. Why would you do that when it's 100% not going to make your life any easier? You are literally moving into a minority group that has a ton of violence against them. They're murdered. I mean, like, why would you choose to make your life harder, basically?
So I feel like a lot of this, her statement is cloaked in this, oh, well, I'm the real victim here. And there's this feeling of certain people in privileged situations where they're like, they feel like they can do oppression tourism, where it's like, I want to try on this thing where I'm oppressed and I get to not be the person who wields the power, but secretly I hold all the power.
Yep. Sounds about right.
And it's kind of like a safe way for them to enact their oppression fantasies because the world is all against them. Boo-hoo. Like, my billions of dollars cannot shield me from oppression.
Yeah, I feel like her whole thing is like, I'm a woman, and being a woman makes me special because it makes me, in this oppressed, marginalized group that, didn't have the right to vote until the 1920s, that still faces lots of sexism and lots of, being a woman is, as we've discussed, hard in this patriarchal world. And I think that she takes so much pride in being a woman that she like doesn't want anyone else to, anyone who wasn't
It's oppression
physiologically
Olympics. Like,
who wasn't physiologically born a woman should not be able to claim that, even if they were, actually born a woman and their body just doesn't match. And
well,
that's not their fault.
the thing with biological sex versus gender is that even biological sex, even within that, and hormones and like the way that your brain develops, and all these things, so it is so complicated, Hillian. Like, we're still researching into this, right?
Yeah.
And even her like reductive arguments do not allow for the reality that in this world there are people who are born intersex.
Mm-hmm.
And and that is, someone, I believe is it XXY or XYY?
I am not the person to ask. I still have lots of research to do on this topic.
Genetics. So like, they're not two X chromosomes or XY chromosomes. I believe there's an extra chromosome somewhere for intersex people, and the determining factor of whether a child is given the male or female designation at birth when they're intersex is like a centimeter of their genitalia. And whether like they feel like, and they're usually assigned female at birth is what I've read. I took this class, a queer theory class at in grad school.
Okay.
And like there's this whole like section on intersex individuals, but this was 10 years ago, so frankly my memory is fuzzy. But like the idea that doctors who don't have all the answers, like we don't have all the answers to all these things, are making determinations on someone's gender identity based on like their genitalia, and like just assign like this box and category, to me seems like so Victorian, and we claim to have moved so beyond the Victorian era, and we haven't. It's just mind-boggling. And her, like, judgmental Karen's like reduction of sex, like biological sex, as just male or female, without even addressing intersex individuals, is her erasing a biological truth.
Yeah. No, 100%. Not to mention, she doesn't even address the fact that gender, no matter what your genitalia are, gender is a fluid concept,
Yep.
and it's a societal construct that, like, is
Girl,
put
she needs to
into
read some
us.
Judith Butler. Like she
Yes.
needs to read Judith Butler. She needs a primer on all of the like queer feminist things. I swear.
It's just, what's the word I'm trying to think of? It's like bombarded onto us from birth, where if you were born with female genitalia, you have these characteristics, you have to act in this certain way, and if you don't look a certain way, if you look like, you have to look like a female, you have to act like a female, you have to have the feelings of a female. And then, on the other side, there's the masculinity and the toxic masculinity and all of that, and that's not something that we should be that's not something we should be like enforcing.
The thing is that trans women are not shielded from toxic masculinity, nor are trans men. And her like saying that trans women are invading women's spaces, I'm like, no, man, like they're women. Calm down. No one's, taking anything away from you. Like no one's taking your billions away or your like comfortable livelihood.
If she claims to love women so much, why can't she understand that someone who is a woman at heart is a woman no matter what is between their legs?
And also, why are you so focused on that? Like that is the least interesting part of a person.
Yeah.
Period. Because that's something that like that was something genetics had to do with. That is something that, like cells decided. Like everything after that, like the person you are, your personality is far more interesting than your genitalia. I'm sorry.
Yeah. I'm sorry. Yeah, my genitalia don't define me, and I don't think that they define anybody else. And I think
what you choose to do in your private life with your partner or don't do or whatever, that's none of anyone's business. And your identity is, like someone's identity does not have to be anyone else's business. I don't get it.
Me neither. It just thoroughly disappoints me. I think that and the thing is, and like I'm making a hard turn here, but I honestly do think, with all of the crap that she has said and all of the awful things and stereotypes that she has enforced, and the people she has alienated, I do honestly think that she has a chance at redemption at some point down the road, because I can.
Women always do. Come on, girl.
Unfortunately, like, there's no way to take back what she said, and people can, and everyone's going to react in their own personal way. And if you in your heart have decided that you do not want to forgive her, no matter what happens, and I respect that, and I want you to live your life and do what makes you feel the best. But I do think that because I can see her being like eventually being interested in actually learning and listening. And if she does take that chance to have many, many different diverse conversations with many people in the trans community and see all sides and learn what this mental block that she seems to be having is and how to remove it, and she apologizes and she, retracts what she says, I do think that at some point down the road, I
don't know. It would take an act of God for me to.
You personally don't have to do anything.
Yeah, no. I'm just trying to like say like,
yeah,
for me to believe that she will be she would be doing this out of her let me gather myself because I'm getting real steamed.
I feel you.
It would take a real act of God for me to believe that she would apologize
and mean it.
She truly means it.
Yeah.
And not because her pocket is suffering.
I think she would only apologize and mean it if she took the time to become properly educated. Because there's no apology.
The education to come from the emotional labor of trans
No,
women and men.
no, we definitely shouldn't be putting that on them. That's it's not their responsibility to educate her. I think that if she, realized that she needs to have this education and be more well-rounded, and she asked to have conversations with trans people and they agreed, then I think that education, I mean, no matter what, the education has to come first. And whether it's, I mean, I don't think she's going to get a proper education without the help of the trans community, unfortunately, because obviously we've learned that research doesn't work for her because she just seeks out the
Maybe
research.
she just needs like a
She needs
one-on-one on
yes.
research first.
She needs human interaction. I feel like that's the only way that anyone's going to get through to her, because just putting down words on a page and having her read them, you can't have the discourse. She can't have the opportunity to ask questions and have someone respond back to her in real time.
Yeah, but I don't think she's interested in that, though.
Right now, absolutely not. But
her whole like essence reads to me like Tommy Lahren.
Oh my god, that bitch existed.
And it's just kind of really disappointing as someone. I mean, obviously I've been disappointed in her for a while now, especially because after a while you're like, man, these books like have very little characters of color and no real queer representation.
Nope.
And like someone was like, it was to me like one of my favorite tweets, and I can't remember the user. I am so sorry, but one of my most favorite tweets was like, oh, remember when Joe was like, oh, I didn't say that Dumbledore was gay in the text because I didn't want to put any like sexual content in there, but also made sure that there was like an innuendo of Aberforth fucking goats. Like but bestiality, totally fine. Okay, Joe. Okay.
I mean, the excuse has always been like her lack of representation and diversity in the books. The excuse has always been it was written in the 90s.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure Black people and people of color existed in the 90s, my friend. Like
queer people too, surprisingly. Actually, did you know?
No.
Did you know that gays existed in the 90s?
The gays? What?
Yeah, someone should tell judgmental Karen.
Oh God. Well, but goblins and the Jews,
And she like on her social media is always like she's so anti-Semitic. She's always like, if you're an anti-Semitic, then you're an awful person. And it's like, well, you're not exactly fully not anti-Semitic yourself. But anyway,
coming from a lot of blind spots, obviously.
Yes, coming from a Jewish person, we can point that out. But
I mean, I am 7% Jewish, so obviously I can point it out as well.
Oh goodness. Anyway, well, anyway, whether or not she has redemption in the future, that's obviously not the topic at hand. I just thought it was good to point out that there are steps that people can take, whether you're J.K. Rowling or, not. There are steps that you can take to become the ally that you refused to be early on in the process. So if you realize throughout all of this that you personally have some stuff to learn and some progress to make in your own life, it is possible to make that progress. Don't give up just because,
I feel like it's a real lack of imagination on her part, which is, I know. It's like, really, Joe? Like, did you run out or something? Like, was there a limited stock?
I mean, one of the most interesting commentaries that I've seen on this whole thing is that like it is incredible that the person who like thought up transfiguration and metamorphagus literally cannot wrap her mind around the concept of transgenderism. Like how How does that go together? You literally have people turning into dogs, and you have Tonks who can change her appearance at will. Have you ever thought that maybe Tonks, was born a man and actually, felt that she was a woman at heart? Maybe
which is really where like fanfic steps in and
exactly.
gives us everything.
Exactly. So, like, a lot of people do believe that Tonks is a trans woman because she has the ability to change her appearance at will, and she chooses to physically present as a woman. There's nothing to say that she was not, that she was born that way. And so, like, the fact that she created this character, these concepts, and literally cannot wrap her brain around the fact that trans women are women and trans men are men is just incredible. Absolutely incredible. Bad incredible. In a bad way.
In a terrible way.
But I'm ready to talk about the responses to this because I'm sick of talking about her. Can we talk about the people who have responded to her? Because
yes, but also before we get there, do you want to talk about the tweets we got?
Oh, yes, yes.
After the
I don't care when we talk about it, but we definitely should talk about the tweets we got.
All right. Okay. So earlier on today, we asked some people to let us know what questions they had for us or wanted us to talk about in the podcast. Ambassador Ortiz at Sky Griever said, y'all know what we're looking forward to, rep it. So I'm pretty sure we already kind of did.
I hope so. I hope so.
Mary asked, Mary wants to know our thoughts on the death of the author and separating the fandom from the author's works.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, you are a lit major, so I feel like you have a lot more like in-depth knowledge on the entire concept of death of the author. I skimmed through a Wikipedia article probably like 6 months ago. So
the idea of death of the author.
I just want to say, I first started looking into death of the author and researching what it meant when the whole Joss Whedon thing happened a few years ago. So
correct.
It's been that long since I really looked into it. So now you take it away. Sorry to interrupt.
No problem. So death of the author is this idea that we employ in a lot of literary criticism and, as literature majors when we're writing the paper, where we separate the life of the author and the context, that the author wrote this in from the work of art, right? So we are going to delve deeply into the text without reference to the actual author's lives. Kind of like stemming from the idea of like, the piece can stand on its own. We don't need to contextualize it through the author's eyes because we can, in a way, criticize it for what it is, but not for the author's life or where it came from. I have mixed feelings about this. I truly believe that a work of art can stand on its own regardless of the author, but there are some works of art that, like, for instance, Woody Allen comes to mind, where the works themselves are so autobiographical that I cannot separate the two the two.
Well, I think that the word autobiographical is a big, like, that if it's autobiographical, then death of the author is not as relatable in that sense.
I don't think that Woody Allen refers to those works as autobiographical, but it's been widely acknowledged that they are.
Their political views and their view on the world can definitely seep into their work.
Well, and also it's been widely acknowledged as well, I should add, that, for instance, Woody Allen's works are strongly influenced by his life decisions and interest in younger women.
Yeah.
Yes. And his predatory predilections. So yeah. So for instance, in the case of Woody Allen, I cannot separate the art from the artist. Um, in the case of Judgmental Karen, I am struggling to do so, but less than I would with Woody Allen, because even though, I mean, my thoughts on the series are obviously continuously evolving as I reread after not reading for a while, and then, and having like this base of knowledge that I now have because of literary theory and literary criticism. And also like political awareness and being a person of color and what that means in this world. And maybe my interactions of being a person of color in this world are limited because I am quite fair skinned. So I may not have the breadth of knowledge that a darker skinned person may have. And there's privilege in that, right? So my views are slightly privileged in that way. But I mean, Harry Potter, and we've talked about this a lot, very male-centered, male-dominated. Hermione should be the heroine we have because she literally solves all their problems. But why is that a side character trait and not a main character trait,
Yeah. I think with at least specifically with Harry Potter, and there are definitely other instances where I had to struggle with whether or not I could separate the artist from their work. But specifically with Harry Potter, I think that it's possible because there are such
beyond.
Yeah, there are such large themes in the book, and I think that every single person who read it took something different from it. I think there are universal themes, but I also think that the reason that Harry Potter is so prominent and such a like passionate fandom that has spanned over 2 decades, 20 years, is because reading a Harry Potter book is an extremely personal experience.
Yeah.
And I think that everybody takes something, like everybody's experience reading the series, reading the stories is extremely personal to them. And it doesn't span over, millions of people. No one had the same exact experience. And I think that's because we all interpret the text our own way. I think that the themes in Harry Potter are large enough that it's possible to take them in millions of different ways and interpret them in all of our own unique ways, and that it's very, very, very highly likely that J.K. Rowling did not have all of those themes in mind when she wrote that book.
I think you're correct. I think that a lot of times she'll take credit for something she didn't intend. And then she'll like backfill and be like, hey, Dumbledore's gay. Of course he's gay. So things like that. And, she will take a progressive read of the text and say, I intended that all along, because it makes her look good. Of the hero for her.
Yeah, it makes her look good. Obviously, the fact that the overall themes and the messages of Harry Potter were so overwhelmingly positive for so many people was good for her because it made her look good. And whether or not it was intentional,
good as a cash cow, my friend.
Yeah, exactly. And whether or not that was intentional, whether or not she had all of these universal themes of love and acceptance and tolerance in mind when she wrote these books, I think that we as a fandom, going through all of our contextual analysis and our deep dives and care, like I don't think she wrote these books expecting that people were going to have one episode that talks for 2 hours on Remus Lupin. I don't think she intended for every single character and every single story and every single theme to be expanded as much as it has been. And I think that, the way that I think about it is that J.K. Rowling had a brainchild 25 years ago, and
we fucking ran with it.
Yes. She put it on paper. She was like, okay, there's this little boy. He's orphaned. His parents died. And he is destined to save the magical world with literally the magic of love. And
so in my mind, to be honest with you, like she birthed it, but we raised him. Full stop.
Well, yeah, I mean, there's fan fictions. There's literally
Yeah.
like
Like
we
shout out to the fandom.
exactly, we expanded the world so much larger than I'm sure she ever thought was possible. And I think that because of that, the story, everything that is physically written down in the text is, because of her, and it's birthed out of her brain, and and also all the editors and proofreaders and stuff like that. But that doesn't mean, like, if you read a line, like, that one line could mean so many things to so many different people, and I don't think that means that all of the universal messages that we thought were coming from her actually did. So I think that it's
So,
possible for us to
the
separate it.
real magic of the fandom, like shout out to the fandom, right? Like the real magic of the fandom is
Yes.
that we took those words and we found comfort in them, and we grew with those words, and we grew them to a community that is inclusive and loving. So really shout out to the fans, because that's like, that community is not something that she made. That's something that everyone else made together.
Yeah,
Right.
she raised a generation of people who are equipped to call her out on her bigotry in this moment.
Exactly. And I am so proud of everyone who has called her out on it. Like, it's insane. And furthermore, I am so proud of like a generation of thoughtful, caring, compassionate, and highly imaginative people who were able to come up with like the best fanfic that is sometimes even better than the books, let me tell you. And who like saw the blank spaces in between and wrote through them and connected with other people who also felt like they were left out in the margins. Because at the end of the day, this is a story about people feeling left out, or people feeling like they don't belong and suddenly coming to their community, right? Finding a community they fit in. And the fandom has been that for a lot of people. And I understand that many people might feel like, you know what, the fandom isn't for me anymore. And that's a completely valid choice and decision.
100%. I mean, if you're leaving the fandom because they've all suddenly gotten super liberal and are standing up for trans rights, and you're like, I didn't sign up for this, well, then maybe I'm glad you're leaving. Bye.
Or if you're a trans woman, or trans person, a queer person, and feel like, you know what, it's time to leave this fandom behind, thanks for the memories.
Yeah, I
Totally
think
valid too.
I think that a lot of people are struggling with, unfortunately, now thinking of Harry Potter and the stories and the books and everything that's associated with the fandom probably brings a lot of pain and sadness to people because they feel betrayed by the author. So, and leaving because for your better your own mental health and to remove yourself from a situation that gives you these bad associations is completely and 100% valid and okay.
Yeah, correct. And we all love you and we want you to be safe and happy and find, a voice and feel empowered in your life. And if that means that you have to leave the fandom and you have to leave this behind, there are other fandoms out there, and we'll be right there with you, because I'm pretty sure we'll see each other in those other fandoms as well.
Yes. But a reason that I think, a big reason why I think that the Harry Potter community will get through this together is because we are so unlike a lot of other fandoms. We're kind of like our own little anomaly, and it's definitely going to be reflected in how we respond to what's going on right now and how we move forward.
I've also seen a lot of people online saying that they will no longer buy official merchandise, and would rather just support like Etsy artists and stuff on Harry Potter and Fantastic Beasts merchandise. So if that's something you're feeling conflicted about, that is a valid avenue. Support the fandom, support those
Yes.
content creators who are imagining a more inclusive Hogwarts.
Yes. And I've also seen people who have said that I mean, it's not really even a drop in the bucket. And J.K. Rowling's probably not going to really feel the monetary loss of boycotting any official WB merchandise. And if you feel that way, and if you still, and it is still completely valid to still buy licensed merchandise and all of that stuff, go to the theme parks, buy a movie ticket for Fantastic Beasts 3. But I know that a lot of people who have felt guilty over that have been combating it with, I spend $10 on a movie ticket to see Fantastic Beasts 3. I donate $10 to the Trevor Project. I spend $20 on a sweatshirt from, the Harry Potter merchandise store. I donate $20 to insert trans charity of your choice, basically. Because then you are giving back to the community and it's offsetting it. You're putting just as much good out into the world as quote unquote, negativity.
So, I mean, all of this to say is, I think I could probably separate the author from the work, because there's no literal way for us to continue discussing the themes in the books without that. And we still we'll still call her out, obviously, because we do all the time on her bullshit. But I mean, if not, we're just gonna have to end the podcast, really. But if that means that but if someone else can't separate the author from the work, also completely valid.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
I hope that was helpful. And then Alex wants to know, from Hogwarts Radio, wants to know that I'm sorry. Let me rephrase. Sorry. Alex from Hogwarts Radio has been watching fan reactions and podcast interpretations. She'd be interested to hear our thoughts on the politicization of the fandom right now. While here at Occupolitics, we've always been politicized.
I think politics are like a large revolving theme in this podcast. When I first read her tweet, I thought she said polarization.
She might mean that as well. Like a lot of people say politics as like an equivalency to polarization, maybe.
Well, yeah, I guess because there's two parties and they are usually very far ends of the spectrum.
In the U.S., yes.
Yeah. In the U.S., yes, two main parties in the U.S. I don't live anywhere else, so I just usually default to the American government. I don't know much about any other governments.
Who would have thought?
I did not go to college for political science. Surprise.
You know what? I'm sorry. You cannot continue on this podcast.
I was a psych major, so I still think my insights are somewhat helpful. But either way, the oh my God, I can't even say the word politicization. Politicization.
You're fine. Continue. Let's just past the awkward.
That word of the fandom. I think that it's, I don't know. Like, what do you?
It's about time. Period. Like, okay. Listen.
I needed seconds to gather my thoughts.
Okay. It's about damn time. Okay, I'm gonna get on my soapbox, and then I'm gonna retreat.
Do it.
Okay. All right.
Do it.
The people who worry about being quote unquote too political, the people who stay silent because what will people think? Or I don't want to ruffle feathers, are people who enjoy immense privilege, full stop. If you are too worried to say Black Lives Matter, trans women are women, because you're quote unquote worried about coming off the wrong way and but what if someone I like doesn't agree with me, even though in my heart of hearts, I truly believe this, then you are in a position of privilege, because there are people out there whose entire body is those things. And they have to live in the world embodying those concepts, and they are likely to die from it. So the choice of speaking up is privilege in itself.
100%. Yeah.
And
I think.
Yeah.
Are you done? No, if you're not done, go ahead.
No, I'm just it's just something that like when people are like, I'm gonna get real emotional. People talk about like being political, like that's a bad thing, when every choice that we make in this world is political, even the choice of not speaking up. Because if you don't want to speak up for other people, you're saying that their lives don't matter as much as yours.
Yes. I don't know what else to, because I mean, I 100% agree. And you said it so beautifully. So,
And I'm just tired of people feeling like they don't want to cause waves by speaking up. But like the only way that we can enact change is by speaking up and taking action. Whatever action you can make. Imagine if all of us enacted love instead of silence.
I think that the word political is so packed in itself because politics and basic human rights are so intertwined. And I think that
Well,
people,
living is political, period. Because
exactly,
you exist in a society with rules, spoken and unspoken.
yes. And I think that there are people who like to use the word political as a way to to bring up societal issues, systemic societal issues with in a negative light, that like talking about these issues is political, so therefore it's negative, we shouldn't be talking about them because it's too political. And honestly,
There
and
are
that's
people who have no choice.
exactly, and like you said, it comes from a very like a place of severe privilege basically. And I think that um when people say that, you know, like, oh, I can't believe that you would stop being friends with someone because of their politics, my immediate reaction is like, I don't understand why why you wouldn't, because your politics show your values as a
Value
human
system,
being.
like your value system, how you view the world, and how you view yourself in relationship to that world.
Yes, and that doesn't mean that like I will never be friends with anybody who disagrees with me politically, because that would just, you know, I would be locking myself in an echo chamber. And obviously that's not something I want to do. I want to be informed. But at the same time, if we disagree on fundamental issues that like shape not even just our lives, like it might not even shape my life, but it shapes the lives of people that I know and people that I care about and people that have a voice and deserve to exist in this world without prejudice, then I'm going to have to make the decision of whether or not it is if it is worth it to keep someone like that in my life. And the answer is usually no.
Well, I mean, again, like I am friends with people who may not agree with my views of the world 100%,
Yeah,
but
exactly. Yeah.
I draw the line at human decency, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like,
Yeah.
if you believe that you are above other human beings, then I'm done.
And I know that it's a difficult topic for a lot of people, because I know that I'm blessed that I don't have anyone in my immediate family or anybody that I deeply love and care about that has different political views than I do. But I know it is a deep, like a very personal issue to a lot of people, because you might be a liberal Democrat and your parents or your grandparents or someone who you love deeply might be a Trump supporter. And I know that that's difficult. And there are obviously ways for you
Well, and
to.
there are also like even more heartbreaking, let's be real. Like, there are people who align with my politics who still wouldn't see me as an equal
Mhm.
because of my gender, my race, and where I was born. Full stop.
Yep.
So, you know, like the party affiliation may give you a snapshot of people's values, but when we talk about being political, we're not talking about necessarily a party affiliation. We're talking about deep down, like, what do you truly believe, and what are you willing to speak out loud and put your effort into?
Yes.
And to me, that is sometimes even more heartbreaking. I've known people who, are activists
Mm-hmm.
who are incredibly into white feminism. And like, what is white feminism if not white supremacy? Because a movement that is not intersectional, you're going to end up like a J.K. Rowling by saying, like,
Yeah,
that's
I mean,
it.
when you said that, I immediately thought of J.K. Rowling.
So there you go. Like, any feminism that is not intersectional is white supremacy.
Yeah, so when you said a quote unquote activist who is, all about white feminism, I was like, you mean J.K. Rowling?
But also, it wasn't judgmental Karen that I was referring to, but also that fits her too.
It fits, yeah. And and then I guess, like, alternatively, if she was meaning to ask polarization as opposed to the one word I can't say, um, politicization, is that the word? I don't know.
Yeah, we'll say yes.
Okay. As far as polarization, it seems like the fandom has been kind of pulled into people who will stand by J.K. Rowling no matter what she says or does,
Mm-hmm.
and people who are not going to take it anymore or even at all. And I think that a lot of that comes from the way that I see it. The people who are choosing to stand by her and not stand up to her there are two types of people in that group, and as far as I'm concerned, and I know that generalizations are bad, but this is kind of like how my mind organizes it. There are the people who are transphobic and just like agree with her because they also share her thoughts and beliefs and say like, oh, she's 100% right. And then there are the people who I think genuinely did not learn the lesson from Harry Potter. Like, I think that it literally
included.
Yes, I think that the main lesson from Harry Potter that I took away, and I know a lot of people did, just went right over their heads, and that is, we have to speak truth to power.
Yeah, and like, the problem when you are the power is that you cannot speak truth to it, right?
Mm-hmm.
And what Jo should have done immediately after finishing the series is take all her billions of coins, drive herself to Gringotts, go into a vault, and lock herself forever, and have the goblins throw away the key, making sure that she did not have Twitter access. All of this could have easily been just completely set aside.
Yeah, I mean, it's just, I think the people who blindly follow her are like, they're just so blinded by like their gratefulness, I want to say, of like what she has brought into their life, that they allow that to just let it become an excuse for everything, for allowing her to just do whatever she wants because she donates to charity, and she has been outspoken on countless other issues on the right side of the issue. But unfortunately, like that, past behaviors do not determine future behavior.
I'm going to say something real controversial, Helene.
Oh, I'm ready for it. Do it.
There are other authors and other books.
Nah, lies.
And I mean, we can remain, obviously, this Harry Potter podcast, love Harry Potter, but there are, other series that talk about, like, magical realms, if that's your preferred genre of
Fantasy.
fiction, of fiction. There are other authors who talk about who have more diverse characters and talk about queer themes. And also there's, I guess, fan fiction if you want to remain in the Harry Potter verse. Um, But that doesn't mean that, just because you love something so much, doesn't mean you have to defend the hateful actions of the person who created it.
I mean, I 100% totally agree with you. And there are a lot of people who are able to actually see the nuance in this and able to, apply the death of the author and not hold, and like a lot of the people like you and me are going through this. And I don't know about you, I can't speak for you, but I definitely at one point had her on a pedestal, and I had to actively
Mm-hmm.
make the choice to bring her off of that pedestal. And I think that it was, I mean, it wasn't easy. I don't think it's been easy for anybody to have to look at someone who you used to admire so much and admit, because at first I went through all the stages. I had denial at first. I was like, this can't be what she actually thinks. Or if this is what she actually thinks, she is going to learn and take this criticism and use it to become a better person and actually read up on the topic and actually become educated. And then she'll realize what she said was harmful and hateful and apologize for it. Honestly, after her first tweet back in December, I literally thought she was going to apologize. I was convinced that she was going to realize what had happened and apologize for like months. And then this happened, and like the second that she had her very first problematic tweet in 2020, which was I think it was a couple of weeks ago at this point. That is when I made the decision personally to unfollow her on Twitter, and that was like the substantial physical thing that I could do to symbolize taking her off of that pedestal. And I think that a lot of people,
I didn't even realize that our account was following her, to be honest with you.
and I had to tell you.
I know. I'm so sorry. Like, I don't know. I don't even remember following her.
I mean, it's just people have to make those decisions for themselves. And I know that a lot of people are still in my first stage of denial. I've progressed much quicker, I feel like, than a lot of people that I've seen, where they still believe that, there is redemption for her right now, that she doesn't mean these things, or, she's just mistaken and she'll find her way eventually. But unfortunately, I think it's 100% come to the point where you have to admit that that's not going to happen.
But what about the people who are like, let's not focus on this. Let's focus on the positives.
Oh my God, don't even get me started. I am about positivity more than anybody else. I mean, not more than anybody else. I think positivity.
You're a true Hufflepuff.
Yes, I'm a Hufflepuff. I think positivity is all well and good. I never think, positivity is not a bad thing. And it has its time and it has its place. But I think toxic positivity and the fact that telling people that they need to be positive, telling people that their emotions that they are feeling right now, that they need to pivot and go to a more positive place, that is not helpful. Like, you can, like, if you want to react to this personally with positivity, then I say power to you. You do you. I am so proud of you and I am behind you 100%. But if I don't want to react that way right now, and I have my own emotions and grief that I am going through, and if I happen to be angry and I want to express that anger, you have absolutely no right to tell me that I cannot do that. And I can handle this in whichever way I feel is good for me. And you, like, basically, like, full stop, you do you.
Okay, so I have a controversial opinion, as I always do, because I feel like it's my duty as the Gryffindor of this podcast to have controversial opinions.
I'm interested.
If your forced positivity comes from a place of privilege, then you're not entitled to it.
And I don't think that.
To explain this.
I was going to say that doesn't sound controversial to me. That sounds extremely reasonable.
Because I know what you meant. As I was listening to, I was like, I'm pretty sure Helene means, like, if you are a marginalized person who feels like hurt by this, but instead you want to focus on the positive for the sake of your mental health, go ahead.
Mm-hmm.
But if you are a person who is privileged enough to not feel any pain at this, like, turn of events and are like, you know what, I can ignore this because it doesn't affect me directly. Therefore, I'm just going to pretend like Joe never said those things and I'm going to continue loving this fandom and loving Joe, then you're not entitled to that, because that is just gross and that is just sweeping the issues under the rug and not engaging in this world that we live in. That is you perpetuating your own privilege at the behest of everyone else who is suffering from the weight of your privilege.
Yeah.
Mic drop.
Yeah. No, I definitely think that the people who are lucky enough to not be so genuinely hurt and like have their feelings hurt, have and feel invalidated. Obviously, the trans community has so much reason to be hurt and angry and confused, and all of the emotions. Exactly, all of the emotions right now, and for anyone to tell someone, even if they're not trans, I am a cis white straight woman, and I am hurt and confused on behalf of everyone that she has directly affected. I have like this curse where like my empathy just takes over, and I literally I am so hurt and confused, and I don't think that anyone should be telling anybody how to feel right now. And that includes like I'm not telling anybody who feels positively to not feel positively. I'm saying if you want to approach this with positivity, then you do that with your own platform on your own time, but do not force that on anybody else.
And also, I mean, if you're coming at this forced positivity because it doesn't affect you directly, and that forced positivity is an excuse to not question or examine your privilege, then you're part of the problem. And we don't want to know you. At least I don't want to know you.
I also don't want to know you.
Because if there's anything more disappointing than judgmental Karen Rowling, who has like a ton of money and an echo chamber, is a Harry Potter fan who cannot even question their own assumptions and self-reflect, even as they advocate for love.
Yes, and just saying, like, I disagree with her, and I believe that trans women are women, but I think that we should all be going at this certain situation with positivity. That it
validates the entire thing you just said.
Exactly. Like I disagree with J.K. Rowling, but I don't think that we should be attacking her. Like that's fine that you don't want to attack her yourself, but don't tell others what to do. Basically,
like don't tell the oppressed how to feel.
Yeah,
and how to deal with that feeling. And also, like, they're just tweets. I'm pretty sure she just blocks everyone who disagrees with her because she's been doing this for years, period. This doesn't hurt her.
No.
Honestly, nothing hurts her. Like,
I feel like it's very similar to telling the Black community not to protest.
And that's what it reminded me of, actually.
Yeah. And not even just not to protest, but also like not to riot, not to act out in violent ways, when all of those expressions of pain are 100% valid. And obviously, as we've seen,
it's hilarious because not hilarious in like a funny way, but like in like a
ridiculous way,
in a farce way.
Yeah.
I'm just like, I'm sorry, you guys lost your goddamn minds when Colin Kaepernick was like taking a knee at the national anthem, which is like the definition of a peaceful protest.
Mm-hmm.
It's almost like the Black community cannot protest, quote unquote.
Yeah, no, I shared. I don't think it really can be called a meme because it's not like funny, but I shared like an image on my Facebook page where it was like, it was a picture of someone like looting a store like that was on fire, and it says, if you're not okay with this, and then underneath it was a picture of Colin Kaepernick on his knee, says, and you're also not okay with this, and then underneath it said, then what you're actually asking for is silence.
Oh yeah, 110%. Everyone who is trying to tone police the Black community, and even like, and in this case, like the trans community with like Joe's tweets, it is all about avoiding their own discomfort.
Mm-hmm.
I can't even speak right now. Is to avoid their own discomfort.
It's unfortunate because we're on a podcast.
I know, right? At being, I could write essays all day long. Speaking of which, Joe gets an F if this was a rhetorical composition essay because all her arguments are flawed.
Yep.
Spoken as a former professor. But it's about discomfort at facing the pain that your privilege exerts on other human beings. So what you want is compliance and silence as a person of privilege to kind of avoid and escape that reckoning. It's kind of like white people being like, well, I didn't own slaves. And it's like, yeah, but the system is rigged against Black people because possibly your ancestors owned slaves who gave you like this leg up on,
mm-hmm.
kind of like generational wealth is a thing, you guys, like educate yourselves.
And the people who refuse, the people who literally say, I've seen so many people, so many flawed arguments in support of J.K. Rowling the last couple of days, but specifically the people who are like, I don't know why you're getting so mad. She never said that trans women aren't women.
She did in a roundabout way. But
yeah,
okay.
but it's the fact that these people literally either can't or refuse to acknowledge the nuance and all of the other ways that what she is saying is harmful, because she didn't outright say something extremely problematic in one sentence that is like you can point to.
So here's the thing. These are the same people who are totally okay believing that Dumbledore is gay, even though she gave us no textual clues in the canon.
I know.
So they're totally okay with that. But they're like, well, she didn't outright say that like trans women aren't women. It's like, yeah, but she literally did everything but say that.
Yeah. So when all these actors and celebrities are coming out with their statements against her with literally the phrase "trans women are women" as their like one defining phrase that shows that they do not agree with her, people are getting upset and confused because they're like, well, she never said that they weren't.
Anyway, speaking of I think this is a good transition because if not, I'm going to melt down. The response to her tweets and statement, our inclusive king, Daniel Radcliffe, said that transgender women are women. Any statement to the contrary erases the identity and dignity of transgender people and goes against all advice given by professional healthcare associations who have far more expertise on this subject matter than either Rowling or I.
That entire statement of his literally like made my entire week. Like,
I'm sorry, did your ovaries explode?
I swear to God, I've loved this man for years. And this statement just confirmed even further that he is the person I thought he always was. And that feeling is just so good. And I wish that J.K. Rowling would follow suit and end up confirming that she was the person I used to think she was, but no. At least we can rely on Daniel Radcliffe to literally be the light shining in the darkness of this entire thing.
It's like when you have like a crush and like they end up being like a decent human being, and you're like, thank God, thank fucking God. Like,
I mean, it was so encouraging to see him.
No choice but to stand.
Exactly. Like, it was so encouraging because he could have taken the easy way out that unfortunately a couple of other people still have done since then, but he could have taken the easy way out of just not mentioning J.K. Rowling by name, just saying like, this is what I believe about the trans community and leave it at that. But he was the very first person in this entire story basically to condemn Rowling for what she said. And that was so impactful.
Speaking of people who talked around the issue, who are some people who you thought like were like could have done better in their statements?
There was like a scale, I think, like so like Daniel Radcliffe, like at the top, right? He's like the best response I've seen so far. And then Eddie Redmayne comes like very close underneath him.
Like I stand. Like I've always loved Newt Scamander, so we're good.
His was number 2, like the second best statement. Maybe I'm biased because I just love Daniel Radcliffe more than Eddie Redmayne, but I do love Eddie Redmayne. And then
you can have Dan, I'll have Eddie.
Okay, sounds good. I love Dan. And then I would say those were the only 2 that actually like called her out and condemned her with her name specifically. I would say probably Emma Watson and Bonnie Wright are kind of like right behind. I am a bit disappointed that they did not specifically call out Rowling or use her name in any of their tweets. They kind of just tweeted their support for the trans community to show what side they were on, which is a good, I don't know, like
it's a step forward, but not enough given their platform.
It's a good symbolic stand. Yeah. I'm glad that they did it. I would have been upset if they didn't. So either way, it was a step in the right direction. I do think they could have gone further though. And I kind of maybe understand why they didn't, but at the same time, like if Dan can do it, if Eddie, who is literally contractually obligated to 3 more movies under her like supervision can do it, then like, I think that people who are done with her franchise 10 years ago could have done it. But just saying. And then unfortunately, Ivana Lynch, her statement really disappointed me.
Yep.
In a lot of ways. And I know that a lot of people their immediate reaction was like, oh my God, this is so positive and loving. And oh, you're so unhateful. And oh, you just want everybody to love each other. But I think that it's a really, really good, what's the word? It's a good example. I literally couldn't think of the word example, Adri.
This is where we are, and we still have a ton to go. So pace yourself.
This is her tweet was a really good example of like that toxic positivity that I was talking about, where I feel like she was trying to police people's emotions, trying to persuade people to be less harsh on Rowling, which
but also like toe that line between like not outright defending Rowling, but also not condemning her. And that, like, I'm just like, take a fucking side, man. Like,
yeah, a lot of people have described her as being in her own like little veganism like bubble.
Yeah.
And I know that she's very passionate about her very specific brand of activism. And I don't think that she takes a lot of time to think about the other groups and other people that are being affected by this. And I just don't, it wasn't reflected in her statement that she has actually taken time to reflect on the trans community and how they must be feeling right now. Personally.
And that comes from, again, privilege.
100%. Yeah. Yeah. And then, of course, I think all the way at the bottom falls fucking Warner Brothers, to be honest. Theirs was literally like a
canned response.
Yeah, like we have to say this so that to have good PR, but we don't want to lose the millions of dollars that we're going to get from her franchise. So we're not actually going to call out her. We're not going to mention her by name. We're going to, call out her actions, I guess, quote unquote, call out her actions without literally explicitly mentioning any of those actual actions. Like they didn't say what she did. They didn't say her name. It was like, like you said, a canned response to how would you respond to this race or this transphobia.
Have, like a Mad Libs like situation for all those PR responses. And they're like, Warner Brothers believes in insert issue here. And we are saddened by the recent insert events here. And like, like that, it just read to me like that kind of response.
Yep. I mean, in the end, all of these responses have been on the right side of the argument, in the very least. But like, some of them reached the lowest of bars. You know, like the bar was so low,
You
and
barely cleared it, my
yeah,
friend. Like,
exactly, yeah. So at
the
least they
bar is so low it's in hell. Like, that's 2020.
yes, I guess it's better than them having said, you know, we agree with her and we don't believe her statements were inaccurate. So I mean that at least it wasn't that.
Well, thank you for that imagined horror. I am going to scream into a pillow right now. Ooh,
Yeah.
terrible.
No, I don't think anybody has really come out on her side in this yet. I know that like Noma, who played Hermione in the Cursed Child production, I think the original cast, came out against her. There's been a couple of like editors and like people involved in like the like original publishing of the books and things like that have come out against her. I don't think that there has been anyone of note that has actually come out and supported her. So that's good.
Yeah, I think a lot of like conservative pieces of trash have, but yeah.
Not anybody related to the fandom, as far as I know.
Oh no, I know what you mean. It's just like it was a kind of a funny thing of like, ooh, look who's supporting you. Like, do you really want to be in this category? Like, if I said something and Tucker Carlson was like, totally agree with that, I'm like, let me rethink my views.
Yep. All of her turf friends, I'm sure, agree with her. So good for them. I think that it's really important that we give, and I know that this is coming, like we are two cis straight females, um, giving our thoughts and our opinions on this topic, and that's just because we happen to be the hosts of this podcast, and this is our platform to do so. But I think that it is extremely important right now to give a voice to the trans community. Let them express how they are feeling and give them a platform if possible. I think that it would be really good if we could find a couple of guest hosts in the Black community as well as the trans community to speak on these issues that we're going to be talking about, that we have talked about and are going to be talking about, and give them a platform and let them have a voice. Because what J.K. Rowling is doing is speaking for them and taking their voice away with her platform.
Yeah, and we don't want to do that either. Yeah, so if anyone wants to kind of talk about their views, non-binary folks, trans folks, Black folks, people of color, you can email us at info@accupolitics and we can set something up.
Yes, we would love to hear from you. And we want to give you a platform to share how you're feeling in this time.
Yeah, and connecting with other human beings who are not pieces of trash is also very welcome.
Yes. And that is all I have to say on the matter.
Oh, that's it? Oh,
yeah,
no.
just an hour and 40 minutes of stuff. That's it.
Okay, transitioning from the turf wars to
oh my god, the fucking phrase. Sorry.
I know, I hate her so much. Transitioning from judgmental Karen to something that has also gathered worldwide attention and traction. Once again in the news, Black Lives Matter. This time by the murder of George Floyd, who was murdered by police officers.
Derek Chauvin, specifically.
Who knelt on his neck for 8 minutes and how many seconds?
I think it's 26. 8 minutes and 26 seconds, I'm pretty sure.
Yep.
And that happened here in Minneapolis. I live in Minneapolis, and that happened about 3 miles away from me, in a neighborhood that I don't frequent very often just because I don't have like work or like any of the spots that I go to very often are over there. But I have been to that area, and so it's just just the fact that it's my community specifically that kind of became
Proximity,
the
yeah.
that became the catalyst for all of this is very emotional. But it's been hard for me to talk on this issue because I just feel so like with the JK Rowling thing.
Yeah.
I felt like that directly affected me because I am so intertwined in this fandom, and I've been part of this fandom for you know, since I was 8 years old. And it's something that I feel really passionate about because of something that I feel like directly affects me. And with the Black Lives Matter movement, it is also something that I'm extremely passionate about. But I feel like I need to, this is even more of a thing where I feel like I need to give the voices to the people who are being directly affected by it,
Mm-hmm.
because I am not, I come from such a place of privilege that I just want to sit back and I want to learn, and I want to, obviously I need to use my voice because everybody who speaks up is helping their cause. And I do as much as I can, as much as I feel comfortable doing so, I will speak out. But I feel like this is such an emotional issue, and it's such a very, 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 very important issue that I feel like it's time to let that community speak for themselves in terms of the pain that they're feeling and how they want things to be, how they want things to move forward, and how they want um, the world to look like after all of this.
Well, speaking of giving people voices, right?
Mm-hmm.
I don't. Last year, I had a panel at at a conference about how Harry Potter talks about grassroots movements and how the best way to organize a grassroots movement is not to try to come in as an outsider and tell the people affected by an issue how they should react or how they should organize, but instead let them lead the charge and support them in their decisions because they
Yeah.
will know what's best for the community, and be open to listening and just being there in a supportive role. And a lot of times, people with privilege see themselves as the savior figure because that's the narrative that we've been taught for people with privilege. Like they can save us, you know?
Well, it's largely what's in our media. A lot of quote unquote like progressive, like in the terms of racial specifically, progressive film and media always include a white savior role.
Mm-hmm. So, you're correct. Like sometimes, like it's hard to talk about Black Lives Matter as a non-Black person when, you know, even though you truly believe in what the movement stands for,
Yeah.
um, because you don't want to overshadow the voices of Black folks. But also remaining silent to me is kind of also being complicit, right? So, like, there's like that tension
Yes.
of, do we talk about it and do we
It's
discuss it or do
it's
we not?
it's cognitive dissonance, honestly. And I think the thing that's made me feel the most comfortable, at least moving forward in my own space and how I want to handle it, is what I felt. And I mean, I obviously I don't feel like I should. I want to speak up, but I don't think I need to be using my own words and feelings to speak up.
So the way that I thought we could do this in a productive way is,
Yeah.
I want to talk about the systemic issues
Hmm.
that brought us to this point, but I am not here to tell anyone how they should protest or not protest, or go about protesting, or go about social, like about asking for change. So if we could just talk about the issues that have led us here
Hmm.
in a way that we could just kind of contextualize this for a lot of our listeners, because I think when, you know, like with the whole Black Lives Matter representation in certain kinds of media, there's this whole like, well, just people are just fed up, but they're not really probing as to what in the system made the people fed up.
Mm-hmm.
So obviously, the biggest thing that we should talk about is police brutality and the militarization of the police. And what does that mean? So a lot of times, so the police let me start over. The police as we know it now, with all this military grade equipment, was not the police that we are supposed to have. The military equipment comes from basically just secondhand acquisition from our wars in Afghanistan. And do you really want the same equipment used in war to be used against our citizens? Like that to me doesn't make sense.
No, it doesn't. I think.
And there's like a mentality also when they train police officers of like us versus them, and that's not helpful.
No, I think that the way that they're trained, in general, I saw this video, this like interview with a police officer where he said that they were trained to pull the gun at their first instinct because they're worried that if they train people to not pull a gun as their first instinct, that then the police will get hurt. And it just exemplifies that us versus them of in the systemic issue is that in their minds, police lives
are
more important. And I know that a lot of people are believe that the police are there to protect like bystanders and bystanders. No, I hate when people say that. Bystanders and the vulnerable, the people who obviously like need protecting, and you probably would include yourself in that. The police are there to protect people like me, right? But that also is coming from a deep-seated place of privilege because
I think Law and Order has warped all our minds.
Yes.
Let's be clear. The police is here much to my chagrin. The police is here to protect the powerful. Laws are written in this country and have been written in this country to protect white, powerful people. And to maintain the status quo.
And the fact, and like,
a systemic issue.
Yeah, the mere fact that you don't have to, like, if you don't have to worry that the mere presence of police could be dangerous to yourself, that means that you are coming from a place of privilege, because that is, and I don't want to speak for them, but from what I have been able to gather from stories and experiences from the Black community, is that is what they are. That is what they have to deal with every single time that the police are introduced into any situation, is that they have to be afraid that calling the police is actually more dangerous for them, even if they are the victims of the crime.
Well, it's vulnerable populations are especially vulnerable to the police when police are called. People with mental illness, people of color, Black Americans. I mean, the times police have shot dogs in residences.
I don't even want to think about it. Oh my goodness.
So they have, when they do wellness checks on mentally ill individuals, they have shot those individuals.
Oh my gosh. That alone is just like, why are we having police do wellness checks?
So, I mean, someone who was worried about someone ended up, I'm not saying the person ended up, causing the death, because the police is responsible, but a wellness check, which should not include guns, ends up being the thing that kills someone.
Well, yes, that's exactly that. When people say that we need to defund the police or abolish the police, I think a lot of people don't realize that a lot of the things and the duties that police have can be handled by people who are much more qualified to handle these situations.
Yes.
And
So
wellness checks are definitely one of those things where social workers and people who are literally trained to handle these types of situations
Mhm.
and people are the ones that should be handling the situations, and not people who are trained to shoot on sight if they feel any bit of threatened.
And that's also a part of the problem with the us versus them is that everything is a threat, right?
Yeah.
So if you already have the us versus them mentality, when I'm wearing the uniform, I am like an opposing force, then anything in your sight, in your line of vision, can be a threat or can be perceived as a threat. And the sense of power that comes from that is frightening. And that sense of power that it's almost like honestly it's like a mental illness that has been created by like this perfect storm of things. Like we don't require we require maybe like 8 weeks of training for police officers in a lot of states. No higher education, not even an associate's in a lot of cases. And I feel like that is on purpose. That is done to like they don't want they want more compliant people who would not question orders. Um, so when they say defund the police, it doesn't mean like eradicate the police. It means let's distribute the budgets in a way that makes more sense to the needs of the community. Social programs are usually drastically underfunded, and police um, are overfunded in terms of like the piece of the pie that they have. And I did a little bit of a sleuthing, and I looked at the U.S. cities spending on policing. New York City is the highest with $4.89 billion, but that is only 8% of their budget. LA has 1.49 billion, but that is a quarter of their budget. So it's not just to me, like this shows that it's not just the amount that is spent on police, but also what piece of the pie does it represent, right? In Chicago, it's $1.46 billion, and that is almost 40% of the budget, 39.6%. Houston is $815 million, and that is 35% of their total budget. So when we think about like city budgets, that like includes like police, fire departments, parks, infrastructure,
Education,
all sorts of things, right?
housing, which
Housing,
all of
social
these things,
programs.
all of these things that the money could be going to, that instead of the police department, are all things that could actually highly positively affect the lives of Black Americans and people of color who are
So when we look at like Oakland, right?
Yeah.
Oakland, California has 41.2% of their budget dedicated to their police.
My goodness.
So then the rest of that money, that like, 58.8%, has to be divided in like 12 other areas.
Yep.
14 other areas, depending on how they structure their budget.
And what is this money going towards other than the salaries? Like, is this money going?
Equipment, personal protective equipment, military grade equipment. Those rubber bullets that are not really rubber, they're made out of metal and are encased in something else, but they call them rubber bullets, that have actually maimed a few people in these protests.
Yeah. Blinded.
Yeah. Like sometimes they kill, by the way.
Yes.
So,
well, I mean, what I'm thinking is like this money is going towards equipment like body cams, which are actually meant to protect the police and not the people that, the citizens of the places that they're supposed to protect, because the police are given the option of turning them on or off. It
And
is,
that's the thing. That's my only problem with that, is that we have seen too many times where that has been turned off.
yeah, because they get to choose, and if they are going to be in a situation that could possibly implicate them as the villain, in that specific situation, they go and they turn their body cams off, and that's where the money is going. Like, do we want our money to be going to equipment and training that actually makes the environment less safe for the citizens and more safe for the police?
I feel like we have higher standards on, like, and I swear this sounds like a joke, but I truly mean it only half jokingly. We have higher standards on transparency about our reality TV stars than we do our police. Like, like the Real Housewives don't get to, like, stop filming when they're about to do something embarrassing, and we get to see it, right? Like, but police are like, nah, man, I'm gonna just shut this camera off.
Yeah, and then go shoot Breonna Taylor 8 times while she's sleeping.
That fucking kills me.
Yeah. And those cops still haven't been arrested as of us recording this episode.
As of June 11th.
Yeah.
So then I did a bit of further digging in our respective cities that we live in. In the city of San Antonio, $820 million out of a budget of $1.27 billion. So a large chunk of our budget is spent on public safety. And this one is not as clear cut as yours, Helene, because public safety in the city of San Antonio also includes the firefighters and EMTs and other folks. But still, that's a large chunk of change. That's about, I want to say 75% of our budget is public safety.
Wow. I would be curious to know at least how many of that specifically go to the police, though.
Yeah, I know. This is what I could find in in the city of San Antonio budget for 2020.
Yeah. And did you look up Minneapolis too?
Yes. If you go to the Google Doc.
Let me do that.
While I look at the city budget for San Antonio again.
Alrighty. Where are you? Where's Minneapolis specifically? I'm seeing all these charts.
Oh no, that's Minneapolis. That chart, well, the chart at the end.
Oh, current year to date?
Yeah, current year to date, yeah.
Okay. So police, $194 million, which is 9.9% of the city budget. That's not as bad as I thought. I mean, Minneapolis, unfortunately, a lot of the big national news stories of the killings of unarmed Black men have come out of Minneapolis. I believe, I don't want to get his name wrong. Yes, okay, I was right. The shooting of Philando Castile was also out of Minneapolis, and that was a very large national news story back in 2000. Well, he was killed in 2016. I can't exactly remember when the national craze around it started, but he was in his car, I believe, with his daughter in the back seat, and he told the police that he had a gun in his glove compartment, and made it very clear that he wasn't going to use it, and they shot him in his car in front of his daughter anyway. And then, of course, George Floyd, and so a lot of these unfortunate. And unfortunate is just such an underwhelming word, because the death of the loss of a human life is way more than unfortunate. But all of these heartbreaking stories that illustrate this police brutality have come out of Minneapolis, and I personally was shocked that I didn't know this, but our police chief is Black, and that obviously shows that just, having people of color in those positions of power is not enough to change the entire systemic problem.
Just like, okay, so here's the thing. Just like having women in power doesn't change the patriarchy, because sometimes women can be the enactors of the patriarchy as well, doesn't mean that people of color cannot be complicit in the systems that perpetuate oppression on their own, race.
Yes. And just, having one Black police chief is not going to change the entire system. It's basically what I'm saying is that it is a much larger, deep-rooted problem that we need to address as a systemic issue and not just a one-time, this one cop was bad. This one cop stood by while someone else knelt on a man's neck for 9 minutes. They're not bad apples. They are, but like it's a systemic issue, which is obvious. But I feel like it shouldn't need to be said, but right now it needs to be said.
Oof, I am still looking for the line item. 1 second. So it looks like the line item that I was looking for, I found it in a 200-page document.
Oh my Lord.
200 plus page document on page 210. It looks like the total funding is $500,000. So this is Adri from the future editing this podcast. I know I said $1 million. I meant to say billion. $500 million. All right, let's go back to the podcast. Almost 50% of the San Antonio budget. And that includes pensions and training and all sorts of different things, but that is the police budget.
Yep, that's surprisingly not very surprising.
Yeah, no, it is not surprising to me either. So, and the sad part of all of this, Celine, is that unless the cities make these documents more accessible, like Minneapolis did a really good job of breaking down more than the city of San Antonio, then people who are not, I don't want to say literate, but you know what I mean, like who have not been trained on how to read these types of financial documentation wouldn't be able to access the knowledge.
Yeah, or even people who don't have, access to that type of knowledge or ways to gain that type of knowledge.
And that's the thing. Like, I've been privileged enough because of my training and background in nonprofit and for-profit environments and getting, I guess, smart enough to read financial documents in the correct way and know when a total is the real total and when it's like just a part of the total. These are skills that I've been privileged enough to obtain, but not everyone is going to understand how to find this information.
Totally. Yeah.
So just to contrast this, right? So I said it's almost $500,000 for the police, right? The Parks Police is $16 million. So let's just add that to the police. But let's look at health, right? That is only $14 million.
And the police was how many?
$500 million.
Oh my gosh. Okay, and the health was 14 million.
Yeah.
All right.
I know that I said $500,000. No. I meant $500 million.
Yeah, I knew what you meant, but yeah. It's good to reiterate
human services, which is like social services, right? $23 million.
Okay.
The library, knowledge. 42 million.
It's more than health.
I know, but so much less, like 10% of the budget for police, though.
Well, no, I mean, yeah, this is just making me see how like under budgeted the fucking health departments are.
Let's see.
And in time like COVID, it's obvious more than ever that we need more.
Oh, and you said housing earlier, right? Like neighborhood and housing services, $12 million.
That's less than the health.
Mm-hmm.
Oh my lord. This is depressing. I mean, and if you feel depressed right now, imagine how people of color feel knowing that all of this is set up to make
Mm-hmm.
their lives more difficult.
This is a system that is set up so that people who are disenfranchised and do not have power continue to be in that same state. It is not set up for the American dream as we are all meant to believe. So, all of this to say, like, I feel like all of this shows us that instead of funding the police to this extent, we need to invest more in social programs that create a community that we can all be proud of rather than police a community that is driven by fear and has an us versus them mentality that leads to violence.
Yeah. I mean, I know, like, I've heard, like, specifically people I know that are worried that um, if we take the money away from the police departments, that these crimes are still going to happen, and this just means that response times will be slower.
I mean,
And
okay, yeah, but
I mean, I want to say I'm definitely not of this like
no,
thought.
I get frustrated because how many stories do we have of police officers not taking rape claims seriously or domestic abuse claims seriously? When they mean crime, when people say crime, they mean like drugs or loss of property. But
Robbery,
when yeah, but when we talk about the inherent value of a human being, the police is not there to help.
not as they should be, for
Yeah.
sure.
And then we have curfews that were done in the cities that had protests and
No, because the amount of arrests of people at protests, they didn't have a legitimate reason to arrest someone just for being at a protest until they enacted these curfews, and the amount of arrests that happened from before these curfews were enacted to after they were enacted, like I'm pretty sure I don't have these statistics, but I'm pretty sure
I
they more
mean,
than doubled.
yeah. So spoiler alert, this is how laws are made. Oh, we feel threatened that the status quo is being questioned? No, we must preserve the power of the elite. How do we do that, you ask? Oh, let's just pass a law saying you can't do X so that we can silence those people. That is literally how laws are made in this country.
Yep. Don't know what else to say on that.
And, like the militarization of the police and the lack of de escalation and racial bias training, right, isn't the only way that our system is rigged against people of color and Black Americans or, people with disabilities or queer people, trans people, like people in vulnerable situations have this, the system is rigged against all of those people. There are disparities in schools, like healthcare and other systems that protect power wielded by white people, including the laws, as I said, who like the laws are just made to protect the elite. Like when you think about like land laws or curfews, like mandatory curfews, or how like the police has all this power to tell you what to do or not to do. Why is that? Like you have to think about those things. In healthcare specifically, like Black women have the highest mortality rate, period. And that has a lot to do with our views as people. Even doctors have these views, sadly, that the Black body can withstand more than any other kind of body. And I think that something I can do, Helene, is to compile a list of books and resources that are useful in thinking about all these systemic issues. And if people have any recommendations of like books about systemic inequality that have helped them kind of see the light, as it were,
Yeah.
That could be something that we put on our site and on our Twitter.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. And even if you're able to compile this before we edit them or before we release the episode, you might even be able to put them in the show notes as well.
No, I definitely will start. I already have like 5 really good resources that I can point to. There are books about how obstetrics, modern obstetrics, had its roots in experimenting on slaves, women. So that's horrifying to know, but also something that we should know. And how what we, the medical advances that we enjoy are sometimes, but not sometimes, a lot of times, based on the suffering of Black Americans and people of color.
A lot of the things we enjoy today are because of the suffering of Black people and people of color.
Yeah.
I mean, the majority.
That's an uncomfortable truth to reckon with,
Yes,
right?
yes, and the majority of this country was built by the hands of Black slaves. Not to mention, like a lot of the things that we enjoy today are due to us completely driving out Native Americans as well and taking over and making their lives absolute hell too. So I mean, there are lots of things that America takes privilege from and has and takes for granted that were given, not even given to us, but taken from people who are still being marginalized and attacked and all of, and today basically they're all still being marginalized. So
standardized testing is another thing that is biased against Black Americans and people of color because they were designed with the white experience in mind. So a lot of things that we think are neutral aren't really. And we talk about algorithms and like people who build algorithms and things like that. And that's where that comes in, right? Like the way, for instance, Facebook's algorithm favors controversial reactions to a post, like the angry emoji is a way to like say, oh, okay, so they just want to like incite rage in the user. So it's everything can have like just because something is in a computer or like a quote unquote standardized doesn't mean it cannot be like that is completely objective, because nothing is. Anything created by a human is not objective by definition.
yeah.
And there was I'm going to end with this because it kind of brings us full circle. There's like a whole Twitter thread of authors sharing their advance, like what their advance was versus like people of color and Black authors' advances. And there's like a disparity between the marketing and advances that are slated for certain authors. 99% of those authors are white in the same publishing houses than authors of color. And the stories that we uphold as a society and that publishing houses pushed into the mainstream with great marketing themes are those by white cis authors.
The sad thing is that I'm not even remotely surprised.
So how do we combat a system that is, again, this is yet another portion of the system that is rigged against Black authors and authors of color?
Black creators in general, honestly.
Yeah, honestly.
I think what we can be doing as allies right now is obviously like giving them a space for their voice, amplifying their voices when we can, and doing what is in our power to enact change. I think. I mean, we need to be working towards using our privilege that we have as innate privilege that we were born with to our advantage, to not to our advantage, but to the advantage of the marginalized communities that need our help right now, and use our voice to give them a voice and use our influence to help them make change for themselves.
Also consume media created by Black people and people of color and
trans people
and Jinx, and any, person who, deviates from that, like, quote unquote, like, norm of white, like,
white cis straight. Yeah.
Whatever. I'm over it.
Diversify your life, people. Diversify your life.
Okay, I think we should, though, end with the media we've been consuming that is giving us life or something. I don't know. We can cut this out if it doesn't.
We can. No, it's okay. I have something in mind. It's fine.
Okay. Tell me about it.
Okay. So unfortunately, this is not, I don't think it's by a person of color or marginalized person.
They're part of the problem.
Yes. But the reason I am going to say this one is because the themes that I have been noticing are largely helpful. And so I've been rewatching this show, and this might be problematic for a myriad of reasons, but I've been rewatching the show Seventh Heaven on Hulu.
Okay.
It's problematic. I mean, the first thing that jumps out at you, of course, is probably what happened with Stephen Collins, who played Eric Camden, the main character.
You mean the sexual predator?
Yes, the sexual predator, Stephen Collins, who admitted to sexually assaulting like 3 13-year-old girls or something when he was, 30.
By the way, he did not identify as a trans woman, J.K. Rowling. There are predators who are still like cis straight men.
Yes.
Most of them are.
So, I mean, that's obviously a controversy, but the reason I've been rewatching it so it's about a family of 7, 5 kids and the mom and dad, where the father is a minister, and they kind of go through like societal issues in the 90s. It might be early aughts. I think it might be early aughts actually, but and I personally related to it as when I was a kid because my dad is a clergy member. He's a rabbi, and there were a lot of similarities in like the expectations and like the morals and things that you're brought up with and how people view you and, preacher's kid, things like that. And so I started rewatching it when I saw that it was on Hulu, and I literally forgot how progressive it actually was. They have lots of episodes that focus on a lot of societal issues, and they have a lot of really good representation, Black representation. Not like main characters, because the main character is the family is white, but all of their best friends are Black actually, and they are portrayed in a great light. They have even an episode on racism and coming together and being allies and standing up for each other and making sure that everybody feels safe in their own space. And then they also have a lot of good representation. Like they have a deaf actress who plays a pretty main role throughout the series. And I've just been pleasantly surprised at how progressive it actually is for a show about a preacher and his family. So
okay, I'll allow it.
Yes. Although I will say the episode that I watched right before we got on this episode was it was actually like laughable how ridiculous it was, where they found like a joint in the house, and they thought their oldest son Matt had was like on drugs, and it was like, pot is so bad, and like the mom admits that she once smoked pot in college, and the dad is like, oh my god, how could you never tell me this is huge, you dropped a bomb on me, and it's like, oh my god, pot is so awful, and like they find out, the siblings find out that it's possible that their older brother might have smoked pot, and they're like, how could you, you're such a loser, and that was ridiculous, but all the other episodes seemed to be pretty progressive.
Well, that did not age well.
No, that episode definitely did. I was like laughing out loud at how ridiculous it was.
Oh my gosh.
What about you? I'm sure that you have a much better example.
I mean, it's no seventh heaven, but I've been watching a few things. I've watched Penny Dreadful, City of Angels. I've watched only like 3 episodes. There's a lot about race, specifically about in the 1920s or 30s in LA, with like, you know, the tensions between white people and people of Mexican descent. And that's been interesting because it's also like, you know, something that has like a lot of like Victorian Gothic elements to it. Like, again, Penny Dreadful. And what else? I bought myself a birthday present, so I've been playing Animal Crossing on my Nintendo Switch Lite.
I'm jealous. I want to Switch, but I don't want a Lite. I want to Switch so badly, and they're all out of stock.
Yes. So first I wanted the Switch, and then I was like, you know what? I don't need the whole TV.
I do.
I can do this on a handheld device.
I can't.
I fully recommend the Nintendo Switch Lite, but I understand if people need the console.
I don't know. I just don't think I'd like the Lite as much, and I don't want. It's not that much money to save to sacrifice so much.
Well, I mean, I'm not. I like handheld devices more anyway, so it's my preference. So I get it. If a console is your preference.
Yeah, I like being able to.
Don't need the console.
I like being able to sit on the couch and, you know, be 10 feet away from the screen and look at a TV while playing a game.
Yeah, I'm more like 1 foot away from the handheld device, but still sitting on my couch. So I don't know. It's been quite relaxing. I thought people were overhyping it, and I guess people were right and I was wrong. Look at me. This is growth.
Oh, and speaking of, at the very beginning of the episode where you were saying like there are other authors that are not as bad as J.K. Rowling, I have made the decision that I want to start reading the Percy Jackson series by Rick Riordan. Rick Riordan has come out vehemently against J.K. Rowling and as a loud and proud trans activist. So I've never actually read his books, and I think that's my next endeavor. I want to get my hand on a box set of the hardcovers of the Percy Jackson series, because I don't like to read out of paperback. I'm bougie, I guess. And once I can get my hands on that, I'm going to read those. I'm really excited.
I very much enjoyed that series when it came out. I don't remember much about the plot because it's been a while.
Yeah.
But I feel like I should join you in that endeavor.
Okay. Yeah. Let's do it.
I feel like this is a worthy cause.
Yes.
And that's how we pivoted from Harry Potter to
Who wants to join us in the Percy Jackson fandom?
Exactly. Come and join us. We're less problematic over there. I see a lot of just paperback sets, Helene. I was trying to find
Yeah, the problem is, the paperback sets are like $20 for all 5 books, and the hardcover sets are like $70. And so I'm just not I don't really like to read out of paperback books because I don't like how they like bend.
But I also like having $50 in my
Exactly.
pocket.
I like to have extra $50 in my pocket. So what I'm thinking I'm going to do is once the world starts opening back up again and I can go to like a half price books, I might go and just see if I can
Yeah.
try and buy each one individually
Look at
used.
you being so smart.
I just love half price books, and I'm pretty sure that I'd be able to find them all at very reasonable prices. So I'm going to
Unless
wait.
the demand for a non-problematic fantasy author has like just skyrocketed every price.
I hope not. Although, I mean, if he is as unproblematic as he seems to be, and his books are as good as everybody thinks they are, then he deserves all the money. So good for him.
Part of me is like, yeah, but that money's going to the publisher. He just gets royalties. So,
Well, yeah, but maybe the royalties are good. I don't know. I don't know
know
how
if the
publishing
royalties are
works.
different for hardcover paperbacks. As a non-published
Are you
person, I
there?
don't know how that works. You know who does though? J.K. Rowling. Well, after 2 hours and a half of talking, I don't know how long this episode is going to end up being. Quien sabe?
I mean,
But
we don't have a ton to edit out, so I'm pretty sure it'll probably be about that long.
so this is our Screaming into the Void. Thank you so much for listening. We'll see you in 2 weeks, I guess. Like, I don't know what else to say, Helene.
I hope that everybody who is listening found this conversation informational, enlightening, helpful in some way. We tried to reach a lot of issues that are important to a lot of people right now. And I just hope that you feel heard and seen. And if you have any suggestions or any questions or anything that you want to reach out to us about, our inbox is always open. We always are willing to hear voices. So please let us know.
Yeah. I mean, we love hearing from everyone. Thanks to our patrons that keep this podcast going. We have a few new patrons. Let me do a quick shout out to these new, wonderful, lovely patrons that we have. We have Jackie Diaz as a new patron. And wait, I had one more. I might have to do like a whole like list of patron things because my Patreon app is not helping today. So, yay, Patreon.
Support our show on Patreon to get awesome bonus content and stickers that are designed by Adri, who is extremely talented and awesome at designing stickers, among lots of other things that she is awesome at.
And recipe cards. So patrons will get stickers and recipe cards every 3 months, kind of like a subscription box, if you will. The stickers for April, May, and June were scrapped once all of this blew up. So there will be more kind of topical stickers in people's mail. Those are going out by June the 15th. I'm really hoping that my ADHD doesn't like make that impossible. And recipe cards include a recipe for butterbeer pancake bread.
Ooh, that sounds delicious.
Polyjuice potion.
Hey, this is Adri from the future again as I'm editing. The recipe is not for Polyjuice Potion. It is for Fire Whiskey. Polyjuice Potion was January's recipe.
And glazed ginger carrots.
Wow, cool. Fun stuff.
I mean, it's kind of like a Weasley reference, you know?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, ginger carrots.
I'm really reaching with the recipes right now because we ran out of the normal ones.
I mean, there are many a way to connect a recipe to the Harry Potter fandom. So
really, all it needs to be is delicious, right?
Yeah, literally any home cooked meal, you could just say Mrs. Weasley's home cooked meal.
Be Mrs. Weasley's glazed ginger carrots.
There we go. Yeah.
Yeah, so I'm really excited. All 3 recipes have a lot of the same base ingredients. So it's not like you're constantly buying different ingredients for each recipe. And it'll go well together as a whole.
So jump on our Patreon to get on that, guys, because you be eating good.
Yeah, and easily cooked meals. I'm not a foodie by any means, and I'm not about to make my life more difficult in the kitchen. Well, thanks for joining us. Thanks for being patient with our sporadic release of episodes during COVID. And enact kindness and love and all the good stuff and none of the hate or intolerance.
Black Lives Matter, and trans women are women, trans men are men.
Yeah. And until then, politics managed. I'm using really old headphones, so it might be leaking something.
Maybe your microphone's picking up my voice.
Can you hear yourself now?
La 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 la. No, I don't think so. So yeah, I
might be leaving that in because that was beautiful.
Okay, I have a beautiful voice.